speakers with us today. My name is Jennifer Lenhart, and I am the Land and Soil Lead at Ambition Loop. We are a young organization, and we are extremely grateful to be a part of this process. But without further ado, very excited to first welcome from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia COP16 presidency, Wael Busha, to offer some welcome remarks to us all here today. Wael, please, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon from Saudi Arabia. It's a pleasure to join this distinguished group of colleagues and experts united in our commitment to success this COP, and also more importantly, to the long-term impact we aim to achieve in compacting land degradation and restoring our valuable ecosystems around the world. Our partners involved in developing this agenda at Ambition Loop will present its objectives and the latest update in more detail, but to give you a quick overview. The COP presidency is launching the action agenda from Riyadh to enhance and expand the role of non-state actors, ensuring their active participation in the collective effort to meet the UNCCD goals, alongside the participation and action of the state actors. On one hand, the agenda builds an existing initiative, which can be accelerated to demonstrate collective ambition and action for delivering on land restoration targets and land degradation neutrality goals. It also includes new flagship initiatives that will be launched at COP16 in the same time that this agenda will be launched. We believe that this agenda will have a profound and positive impact across the various sectors, and we recognize the valuable contribution of the experts involved in shaping it. We look forward to advancing this agenda in the coming 2 years of the COP16 presidency and ensuring its success in promoting more sustainable and resilient ecosystem. Thank you all, and we look forward to having you here in Riyadh very soon.
Thank you, Wael. Very grateful for your welcome remarks and also your support, and we have been so thankful to work with you in this process. So welcome, dear colleagues, to our webinar today, to Riyadh and beyond, taking action now to restore 1.5 billion hectares of land. We have a tight agenda with us today. We are very grateful to start off with two of our wonderful founders at Ambition Loop, who are also former UN high-level climate champions at COP25 and COP26, respectively. That is Nigel Topping and Gonzalo Munoz, and they will give an inspiration and brief history of the action agenda, especially how it's coming from the climate agenda. From there, I will very quickly give you a crash course on what we have done in the last just over 2 months to build a narrative around the Riyadh Action Agenda. And then it's really to some of our fantastic colleagues who are also members of our new advisory board to the Riyadh Action Agenda, and that is Dr. Susan Chombra from WRI and the Honorable Princesses Machel and Princess Nora from the Aeon Collective. They'll just tell us a little bit about what they're doing, which is really action-oriented and demonstrating all the great work that is out there. And hopefully we'll have some time for your comments and questions. And please, we did this in a meeting format, not a webinar format. So please do pop your ideas into the chat in their interim. And we have great colleagues here that hopefully can answer in real time and/or will use the remaining time on that. So with that, I'd love to hand over to Nigel and Gonzalo to get a quick take from the both of you in terms of building up the action agenda. Take us through, some of the fantastic work you did, also with short timelines and a lot of stress and a lot of excitement to get us inspired as we head towards Riyadh next week. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much, Jen, and thanks to the whole team, and of course, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for allowing us to be able to present what is feasible and somehow what is we think needed at this moment in time and history. We know that we're in a moment in history that there's so many pieces that are moving. There are so many challenges that are raising. The situation gets complicated even with geopolitical tensions that we are confronting. And due to that, it's more and more clear that the solutions should always come from a whole of the society approach. Also because we know that what the parties can keep on negotiating to a certain level gets stretched, right? So what had happened in the climate agenda is very particular and very concrete to analyze the situation, where, of course, the main moment for the climate agenda was in Paris, and was exactly then when the role of the high-level champions was created in order to give a very concrete and organized way to rally the non-state actors towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And that logic has increased in the last 10 years, up to the point where, of course, when Nigel and I were the two high-level champions running this agenda from 2019 up to 2021, and then Nigel for 2022 as well, we realized not only that it was extremely important for all non-state actors, meaning subnational governments, NGOs, civil society at large, businesses, financial institutions, scientific organizations, to connect in a very concrete way to what is being discussed, or how was being discussed at that time in the climate agenda. But at the same time, it was really clear for us the importance of showing the real economy elements to the negotiators and the delegates and, let's say, the politicians that are at the end designing the rules of the game. So the combination, the two-way combination, was clearly very virtuous. And what we started seeing was the need on strengthening that role as much as possible and as rapid as possible. With that in mind, we launched the Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, the Breakthrough, the 2030 Breakthrough, the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda. So many initiatives that have been really critical for non-state actors to connect in a much stronger way with the party-driven process, but at the same time, I am sure that it has been extremely useful for parties to understand much more what is happening in the real economy, and through that, accelerate action and increase the ambition. In this year, we're seeing that happening even with more intensity. On one side, we're having 4 big environmental conferences, starting with CBD in Cali, then of course Baku with COP on climate. During this week, we're having the INC process on plastics, and next week we will start with the Desertification Treaty. In all of them, there's a huge importance of mobilizing non-state actors to support the parties and for parties to understand much more what is happening in the real economy. And we're seeing that also being reflected in particular cases. So, for example, one of the really important outcomes of Baku at COP29 was the recognition of the role of non-state actors and the extension of the mandate for another period, another 5-year period. It's not only the importance of having that now in our hands, but also having Brazil supporting that and being the main party that allowed that to happen. Why is it important? Brazil normally is a delegation that historically hasn't necessarily been the one leading the logic of the action agenda until this year, because they realized that for next year in Belém, there will be not much more to negotiate. It will be all about implementing the solutions, and therefore having real economy actors showcasing and supporting the process, and at the same time allowing the countries to have a much more concrete mechanisms to implement their national plans is probably going to become one of the most important elements in Belém next year. And we hope that we will also see all of the synergies amongst the different Rio conventions congregating very rapidly in Brazil. And of course, in that sense, we celebrate the possibility that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is offering for having a strong action agenda coming from Riyadh to merge or complement the synergies of the other 3 Rio conventions and set a very strong path towards COP17 in Ulaanbaatar in 2026. That, I would say, is in general part of the history, but I want to repeat the importance of having strong mechanisms for non-state actors to support the role of parties at COP16 next week in Riyadh. And I'm totally sure that we might come with a very strong tool for the sake of CCD, but also for the other environmental treaties that are being negotiated. So Nigel, I hand the floor to you so you can complement anything that I might have said.
Well, thank you so much, Gonzalo. And just a couple of thoughts. First of all, thank you, Wael and Dr. Osama from the Saudi Arabian presidency of COP16 for the trust they placed in us. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the sort of spirit of collaboration that is, I think, so important to creating an action agenda which really is in service of the incredibly bold goals that the presidency's laying out and that the UNCCD has. And Wael touched on a couple of these. The first is that we're very aware that lots of people have been doing really good work in this area for a long time. So we're not coming in saying there's a new show in town, let's start lots of new things. The spirit is very much to identify and build on and support the good work that you are all doing, so that this is a whole of society, a whole community, an ecosystem approach. But also recognizing that there are some exciting new things being launched, and Wael also mentioned that there's some big flagship initiatives going to be launched next week. So that idea of keeping on building momentum, being very aware of what's going on, and then launching things where there are gaps is for us very important. And I think this just obviously just coming back from Baku, just a couple of little examples of how getting the right framework and sort of collaborative approach can allow good things to continue and then new things to be launched. So in Baku last week, for example, I was very conscious. I was the last speaker at one event about shipping. In Glasgow, just 3 years ago, we launched the Breakthrough Agenda with a clear target for decarbonising shipping by 2030. At the time, the multilateral target for shipping was very weak. But I was on an event with the executive secretary of the International Maritime Organization, who now have a target that is bolder than the one which non-state actors presented in Glasgow. That's the sort of example of what we call an ambition loop, which is why we named our NGO Ambition Loop, because we see that process as being really important, like non-state actors emboldening policymakers to set more ambitious policy, and that in turn shifting the real economy. And another example of the framework of the action agenda, the breakthroughs being added to with a new breakthrough, was the work which Sagarika Chatterjee and Anthony Hobley from the Champions team and Howden did to launch an insurance breakthrough, really unleashing the power of insurance to de-risk investment. Of course, and those solutions, of course, are just as relevant for investments in drought resilience, water infrastructure, regenerative farming, as they are into other types of investment. And then the other point was just to re-emphasize what Gonzalo said about the importance of convergence. I mean, a lot of the work I've done over the last 15 years has been in collaborative initiatives to try and simplify the ecosystem of goals and initiatives so that businesses, cities, finance organizations, community organizations can navigate what sometimes is that we as an ecosystem sometimes make very, very complicated. And in particular, I think it's very relevant, as Gonzalo alluded to, that land, food and agriculture, water infrastructure for drought resilience are actually underpinning all three of the Rio conventions. And so for an ordinary business or an ordinary bank, we want to try and make sure that they're not asked to do land restoration for climate on Monday, land restoration for biological diversity on Tuesday, and land restoration for combating desertification on Wednesday. We really should be able to converge the action agenda. So we've been very conscious to look at what's happening in support of the CBD and UNFCCC and try and simplify that. And the last point I make is that this is an ongoing process. We're not trying to fix something, but we need to be learning. There'll be gaps, there'll be things we need to correct, and there'll be new ideas that come along as we go. So for the 2 years of the presidency, and hopefully for much longer, this can provide a structure which we hope will really lead to an acceleration in awareness and in resources going towards the solutions that you're all working on. And I just say, just speaking to the Secretariat yesterday, Jen, I'll hand back to you. I was really encouraged to hear that already the level of registrations for the UNCCD in Riyadh is double the previous record. So I think between all of your work already, led by the presidency and the Secretariat and many of you, we've done a good job in raising awareness and the level of expectations. Now we've just got to deliver on it. So really looking forward to meeting all of you in Riyadh next 2 weeks, but also in working together over the next 2 years and the rest of the decade to turn the Riyadh Action Agenda into a really powerful tool for mobilizing more resources and more action on this crucial agenda. And with that, back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Gonzalo and Nigel, for your inspirational words and also for taking us through the history of how this momentum has been building and is coming to the UNCCD process. Amazing to hear about that double of registration and huge accolades to our friends at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for really putting this COP on the map. And we're excited to be working with you in this process. I'm going to share, dear colleagues, a quick overview of what we have developed thus far in terms of the Riyadh Action Agenda. Mind you, this is a work in progress. We put together a fantastic team of roughly 15 people, more or less from the start of October. We've been working at speed. With that, we might not have gotten everything right, but that's why we're very excited that you're here with us today, because this is a work in progress. What we want to do in Riyadh is launch this agenda. And then we want to work with you. As Wael also pointed out, this is something that will be developed over the 2 years of the presidency. So with that, let me just give you a quick overview of what we've been doing. We have been invited by the presidency to support the creation of this Riyadh Action Agenda, to accelerate the work of non-state actor engagement, to support UNCCD objectives on land degradation management and restoration, and also, of course, to understand and recognize and profile the work that states and multi-stakeholder partnerships are doing as well. So one of the key pieces that we've been doing is ensuring alignment. Alignment with what is already in there in terms of the UNCCD key mandate, but also how can non-state actors join in this space. So we've stolen a few slides very purposely from the Secretariat with their permission, and just to kind of anchor whatever we're doing with what is already out there. So we know that the UNCCD is the global vision and voice for land and drought resilience. We heed those cautionary tales with up every second an equivalent of 4 football fields of land becoming degraded and up to 100 million hectares a year. Droughts are becoming much more frequent since the year 2000. And this is the top line goal for the UNCCD, which means it's also the top line goal for the action agenda. And that is to restore 1.5 billion hectares of land by 2030 to reach land degradation neutrality goals. And our role in particular here is to raise global ambition and accelerate action on land and drought through a people-centered approach on this urgency. The approach that we've been doing in the crash course of our last 2 months has really been to draw on science and evidence-based approaches. We come in here with humility. We know that we are the new kids on the block. We're coming late into this, but we want to really see and build on those existing commitments. Some of the fantastic work that many of you are doing, we want to lift that in this action agenda. So it's really about surging coordination and collaboration and amplifying the work of all of the partners. And that includes all of you, as Nigel said, as part of the Riyadh Action Agenda ecosystem. And especially when it comes to the real economy for non-state actors, we want to understand the value of finding alignment across the Rio Conventions, learning from each other, accelerating land, acting on land is also should be acting on biodiversity and climate, and vice versa. And by doing this collaborative approach, we really want to see an added value. So what we're trying to do in the spirit of alignment is we want to build the initial architecture of the Riyadh Action Agenda as it links to the action agenda that will be hosted during the COP through a series of thematic days on finance, land, agri-food systems, governance, people, science, technology, innovation, and resilience. And in doing so, we want to see how each of those thematic days and the key pieces that come from them emerge as one collective whole. So what we've tried to do here is we put people and the communities that they live in at the very center of the Riyadh Action Agenda, in particular, vulnerable communities. Then we have 3 action areas, as we're calling them, on land restoration, sustainable agri-food systems, and drought and water resilience, and 3 enablers. Finance, perhaps finance is the core one to really unlock everything else we're trying to do, but also the importance of science, technology, and innovation, and governance. And so these are our top line narratives, as you can see them, and very much aligned with what is already out there within the UNCCD space and or what will be coming and announced at the COP. So that is, again, that 1.5 billion hectare number to restore that by 2030, including the importance of agricultural land, restoring 250 million hectares of degraded agricultural land, to strengthen drought and water resilience for roughly 500 million people, and mobilizing collectively together that 2.1 trillion that is needed in financial investment. Now, this is up to all of us and so many more that are not on this call with us today. So let's bring in and grow our ecosystem on this. And I would just say, we're just getting started here. This is the outline of our architecture. And then we want to create much more specific commitments for the different communities, as Nigel and Gonzalo pointed out, whether it be cities, financial actors, smallholder farmers, etc. And of course, we want this to really be, how can different non-state actors feel both valued to contribute to the Riyadh Action Agenda, and what do they bring to it, and what do they gain? Now, I'm not going to run through this slide, and I'm also conscious it's a lot of text, and I want to speak quickly, so we will be sure to share these points with you later. But we see that, these different communities of non-state actors have something to give to this collective goal. I've also added UN agencies and state actors at the bottom, because while they are doing a separate piece than the non-state actor agenda, we need to very much work in collaboration with the strong work that they are leading connected to this space as well. So just in the, moving forward and trying to kind of give you that crash course, we're building this Riyadh Action Agenda collaboratively, but very much through a rapid review. We've been at this for just over 2 months, and so we haven't consulted enough organizations yet, but here are some of those that we've been speaking to in informal working groups, in bilaterals, and whether it be financial institutions, academia, nonprofit, private sector, cities, indigenous peoples and communities, etc. So this is just some of them. And if you see your logo is not here, please get in touch with us. And maybe I can ask one of my colleagues to drop our land@ambitionloop.earth email into the chat so that you know how to find us centrally. And we will happily include you in this work going forward. In the meantime, we've also brought together a fantastic expert advisory group. We've kicked off with 1 meeting, and we'll have a follow-up after COP, and then we will be working with them over the 2 years of the presidency and potentially beyond. We will see how excited they are about this working with us. We're very happy to have several of our advisors on the call here today to share what they are doing. And the result until now is a background paper. Now, this background paper has been done through a rapid consultation, and if you haven't been included, this process is ongoing, and it will be developed over the course of the COP, and then turned into something more formal afterwards. And I will ask maybe another one of my colleagues to just drop in the chat the feedback form. We will close that feedback just at the moment so that we can give back our friends at the presidency a clean copy of the document as it has been developed through all the feedback thus far, but then we will open this up again and make sure we get all of your valuable inputs in it going forward. It starts with an executive summary. It goes into the what is the Riyadh Action Agenda, picks up on those 3 action areas on land, drought and water, and agri-food systems, and then it looks at the enablers. And we try to anchor how this will help to UNCCD relevant goals, but also other global goals. And finally, we finish it off by focusing again on people, because it's really about people, vulnerable people and the communities that they live in. And that's, you know, our top line narrative there. And of course, finding those synergies. We also welcome you, those who will be with us in Riyadh, to daily multi-stakeholder dialogues. Each of these dialogues will follow the particular thematic day, and we want it to follow that day in order to really build and listen to all the great stuff that will be lifted at those particular thematic days, and then take that input and bring all of your voices together through, you know, roundtable discussions in order to flesh out some of the details in this text and in this broader agenda as we go forward. We do have a meeting room. I didn't get it in here, but we will be sending out the invitations likely today or tomorrow. So you will have that very, very soon on our end. You know, I told you this has been a rapid consultation, just to share with you a little bit of some of the speed and scale that we have been working at. And then I would like to close here and say that, you know, this is really about what comes. This is the launch. Next week, we will have the launch of the Riyadh Action Agenda, and then we will be building this out with your great help, we hope, over the next 2 years as a key legacy of COP16. We want to build the momentum for this narrative, including what are the different communities that you're a part of, and how can your community help collectively to build towards that 1.5 billion hectare goal. We need to find a platform so that we can really anchor this in. We'll be developing the campaign, have a website link so that you know where to come to, in addition to just sending us a quick email, but really where you can see that big picture narrative. We want to enroll all the great work you're doing. This is about a collective movement on land restoration. And then we want to track progress so that when we get to COP17 in Mongolia in 2026, we can say, look at how non-state actors, together with multi-stakeholder partnerships, have really helped move the needle going forward on this. And we will be hosting different events over the course of the UN year, including, of course, the climate COP next year in Belém in Brazil. So thank you, Gonzalo, for also mentioning Brazil's important role to play here. And that's a little bit what I wanted to share. If you don't know what Ambition Loop is, we are a very young organization. We'll share this afterwards, so you don't need to read up on us at the moment. But if you're like, who is Ambition Loop and why are they doing this? We just want to make sure that you know that we have are very excited to be working with you in this space as well. And with this, I am extremely grateful and excited to bring in 3 of our advisory group members, and that is Susan, together with Princesses Machel and Princess Nora. I think, Susan, we'd love a quick intervention from you on what WRI is doing in this space to help kind of build that movement on moving towards that 1.5 billion hectare goal. And then we'll be very grateful to hear from the princesses on the work of the Aeon Collective. And then we will open the floor to comments and questions. And please, dear colleagues, this is our space together. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Brilliant.
We can hear you now. Can I have my colleagues pin you so we can see you as well? At least I still see my face pinned.
Super. Thank you, Jennifer. And let me pick from where Nigel left, that we need to recognize there are fantastic initiatives that are going on landscape restoration. And so I will start from there and say landscape restoration is urgent, it's worthwhile, and it's achievable. It's one of those goals that is within our reach and that can be able to help us address the anthropocentric polycrisis of climate, desertification, and biodiversity. Now is the time to turn commitments to action, and Africa is on the lead. Talking of action, the World Resources Institute, in partnership with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, and other partners, are driving one of the most ambitious restoration initiatives on the continent called the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, AFR 100. AFR 100 aims to bring 100 million hectares of land in Africa into restoration by 2030, and therefore aligning with the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration and the SDGs. Under this initiative, 34 out of 54 African countries have already committed to restore close to 130 million hectares across the continent. We have seen tremendous progress on the ground through the actions of governments, small and medium enterprises, CSOs and CBOs on tree-based restoration efforts. For example, in Ethiopia, through the Green Legacy Initiative launched in 2029, a target of planting 20 billion seedlings within a period of 4 years was set, bringing Ethiopia into a place where it's going to be green and climate resilient. By the 4th year, 25 billion seedlings were already planted, mobilizing more than 20 million citizens. In Kenya, the president initiated a 15 billion tree growing initiative that aligns with the AFR 100 target of restoring 10 million hectares. But the true magic of restoration lies in locally led restoration efforts that target local communities, either in terms of businesses that are trying to look at tree-based value chains and restoration business models that can catalyze economic development. And these ones are also combining grant-driven CBOs or community-led initiatives. So it's not just the businesses, it's also the restoration that is aiming to restore for ecosystem services such as biodiversity, water, food security, and others. That includes youth and women groups. This model is what Terra Fund for AFR 100, which my organization, WRI, and other partners have been running on the continent to support AFR 100. It has seen more than 25 million US dollars invested in these local initiatives just in 2024 alone. 3 major landscapes in Africa were targeted, including the Greater Rift Valley in Kenya, the Rusizi Basin, that is a transboundary landscape between Eastern DRC, Western Rwanda, and Burundi, and the Ghana Cocoa Belt. These landscapes are actually acting as living labs for us to know what kind of restoration works where and for whom. Because we know that there's no one solution, there's no silver bullet, and there's no one solution that fits all. So we need to be more creative in driving finance, but also restoration activities that are going to be locally relevant, helping us to achieve food security, improving water availability, improving the quality of life, and creating jobs on the continent. I cannot overemphasize the need for jobs on this continent where we have millions of youth getting into the job market and there are no jobs to serve them. So these landscapes, we can learn a lot and we can share a lot, but they are just living labs. I'm sure other programs are also running similar landscape initiatives that we can share in Riyadh and beyond. And this is the way to go. So allow me to leave you with 5 key lessons that we have learned from these landscape level efforts. First lesson, we do need to do more targeted restoration so that we have the right kind of restoration initiatives in the right places. Africa is a diverse continent, ranging from high humid tropical forests to savannas, to miombo woodlands, to highly integrated agricultural lands, and even pastoralist communities in arid and semi-arid areas, to even deserts. And so there's no one size that fits all in terms of restoring these areas, but also understanding that communities that live in these particular places have got different needs and different socio and economic characteristics. And so it's possible to do restoration in a way that is right and targeting the right places and the right communities. Second lesson, we have mechanisms to deliver finance to local community groups. Do not let anybody tell you that we haven't figured out the plumbing mechanism to get finance from global to local. Terra Fund is one of those, and I'm happy to share with other partners what we've learned from that. But there are many other initiatives and organizations are really trying to create, even governments on the continent. The third element is that we need to strengthen restoration business models and integrate outcome-based payer models for sustainability. We know grants are never going to be enough to restore 1.5 billion hectares. And so thinking innovatively around business models and thinking with the private sector actors is going to be crucial. Imagine all the ecosystem services that restoration sort of generates. from hydrological functions, that's around water, water quality, water availability, that then private sector actors, whether it's beer companies, soft drinks companies, or other businesses, are actually then using that water. What kind of arrangement can we get into to make restoration sustainable? Biodiversity, carbon, food security, to name just a few. The fourth lesson is we need to accelerate the momentum of restoration to reach our goals by 2030 by bringing all of a society approach. We need initiatives that take lessons from what is going on, avoiding duplication, and driving innovation. The last point that I'd like to share with you is that investing in cost-effective monitoring system is absolutely crucial for building trust and accountability. My organization, for instance, we have invested in state-of-art monitoring through the Land and Carbon Lab and Global Forest Watch that a lot of you will know, but also getting into partnerships with organizations such as Meta to leverage on the power of AI to drive down the cost of monitoring and be able to create more transparent and accountable systems across the continent. Lastly, I would like to mention that AFR 100 is a sister initiative to the Great Green Wall, another effort to restore 100 million hectares, primarily below the the Sahel Desert, that's the Sahelian belt, and stop desertification. So AFR 100 and Great Green Wall are complementary initiatives driving unstoppable political and action momentum on restoration in Africa. So I look forward to seeing most of you in Riyadh to share more and advance the restoration agenda to stop degradation, desertification, and for the benefit of our people and planet. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jennifer.
Wow, Susan, thank you for those extremely inspiring remarks, very concrete efforts, and we are so excited to be collaborating with you in this space as one of those fantastic examples of action. This is what we want to mobilize and demonstrate, and we want to hear and learn from all the great efforts that all of your organizations are doing. We know that we also have some frontline farm community workers on this call. Drop in the chat what you're doing. We really want to know. But for this, I'm also extremely excited to welcome two other members of our advisory group. That is Princess Machel and Princess Nora. Can we please have the spotlight on them and to hear some of the wonderful work that Aeon Strategy and Aeon Collective is doing in this space. Thank you again, Susan, and we look forward to seeing you and working together in Riyadh.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, I think when we first met, Nigel, I gave a fair warning that Noor and I are almost like two brains, or the opposite, one brain and two bodies, and that sometimes duty pulls us in all sorts of directions. So while she was here a few moments ago, you'll just be getting the poor part of the double this time around. But really happy to be with all of you. Thank you. Really happy to be with all of you here today. And I just want to give you a bit of a brief around how we've been approaching the opportunity with COP16 at the end of the year. Primarily, I think the opportunity inherent to it is us being Saudi. So naturally, being so close to the presidency and understanding in depth what are their outlooks overall and what are the inherent opportunities that they've recognized within the space. But I think more importantly, recognizing that there are two other Rio conventions that have had their own gatherings beginning of this year, with some, let's say, tension going into COP29, which is, I have to say as well, Nigel and Jennifer, we're the poorest of representation because we are coming at it from a perspective of climate and energy policy, that we knew that there might be opportunities to pick up on some of the gaps, let's say, that might have emerged with COP29 and keeping our North Star at COP30 and understanding what are the opportunities of uplifting this convention and giving it the proper merit. I think for too long, this has been relegated as something that's much smaller than the task at hand. When it comes to the reality of what we're trying to tackle, being someone from a background in climate, and when you start looking at the numbers of the task that we have at hand, no sane person would say that aligning those agendas very closely to one another would not only be yielding quote unquote co-benefits, which is part of our usual language at the climate side, but more so real, tangible, concrete shifts and changes that will be not only touching the life of our, or the stability of our own atmosphere, but the lives of the very population upon whom we're banking to sort of bring us out of the current situation that we put ourselves into. So from our side, as EON Collective, as we endeavored going into this COP, we wanted to make sure that our agenda had two main cornerstones within this space. The first is that we had equal presence and equal weight, both in the green zone and the blue zone, as two individuals that spend most of their times running from one space to another in the blue zone. We recognize that we have a unique opportunity with this particular convention, given that the green zone will be introduced to this space for the first time, that it should not be treated or relegated as a sideshow or a roadshow, but rather as the main event and as the main space through which we can connect with the community at large and allow for their voices to have an active impact on the pace of the process, but equally in terms of the action that we'll be developing. And then second, and I think most importantly, that we should not be looking at COP at the end of the year as the destination, but rather the launching pad. And I think none is more demonstrative than the Riyadh Action Agenda. We have a very unique opportunity, given that the Kingdom will be hosting or holding the presidency for the next 2 years, and given that the next year will be a very important one in terms of crafting what our environmental agenda will look like over the next few decades, keeping in mind as well that while we're saying SDGs 2030, that tends to be around the corner. And for a lot of us that are trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve, we need to ensure that we're taking this with a degree of seriousness that is not just pandering to certain talking points, giving certain positions, giving airwaves for different groups to be unpacking one topic or another, but rather ensuring that when we are saying all of society, when we are saying all of community, we are allowing for active participation of all of the above, not just the parties that are interested in issues around land or issues around the environment, but to say to the artist, you have a place here, to say to the urbanist that this is a part where you'll be co-crafting the future of our cities, that you're currently in the works of planning for the next 5 years. You're here to try and help us orient ourselves around what would our future look like from an energy mix, from a water use, from food, water and agriculture, from the very livelihoods of our people. But when we are talking about the indigenous people, local communities, I think we have a very important superpower that we can tap into in a place like Saudi Arabia, which is the generational space that we have between that more sustainable way of life, or that closer relationship that we have with the land as our brothers and sisters in Africa do. It's essentially that of our grandparents, of our parents, and not necessarily of our forefathers. So that close proximity gives us a unique opportunity to really tap in and hone in and sharpen our tools when we are looking into ancestral wisdom, as opposed to reinventing and repeating what others have been trying to do time and time again, really hone in and harness the power of the whole system. And honestly, Susan, my hat's off to you. I think you've said it quite beautifully when you said, none of the issues around finance are true. I think we have a big issue when it comes to perception. I think we also have the issue of trying to come up with everything on our own, but not necessarily trying to complement the efforts of one another. If we let our egos a little bit to the side and really be open and bold enough to say, what can we really do collectively? Not my institution versus yours, but really tap into the power of the network. This is what we're trying to bring in terms of a flavor to this COP, in addition to all of our programs. So we're hoping that you'll be able to see the flavor of how Saudis walk the talk, how we're bringing different legacy components that are meant to both shift policies on the ground when it comes to issues around land tenure, for types of solutions that we're currently looking into with our colleagues at the AFR 100 and Planet around monitoring and verification for some of those bold ambitions that we have, and then ensuring that while we're doing so, we're not looking at it as a transaction. We're not just talking about technologies and innovation in voids. It's not about tech transfer. It's about empowering all of our people to take ownership of their future and be able to build upon it in a way that's consistent. So on our side, we have two main flagship efforts as EON that we're aiming to, one of them relaunch, but the other to really put on the map and sort of contribute to this process. The first is what we call our Tree Library program. And in short, we wanted to make sure that we had a program that was very much speaking to the grassroots need that exists all around the world of building up and shoring up these types of programs that felt very much close to your hands, something that you can roll up your sleeves and get down and dirty and get the job done, and do it in a way that's not parachuting those priorities. So we're working with series of like-minded institutions all around the world to establish this network of physical tree libraries around the world. But then to say on the digital realm, is there a way to better connect and have these conversations happen with more effectiveness, both within the nodes of the tree library, but also beyond it? Because again, we cannot be preaching one thing and saying that others are trying to repeat the same efforts that others have been building on time and time again, and then do the same mistake on our side. So that's why we're connecting it to a network that we're calling the Hive, where we're attempting to call out not only our efforts, but also the incredible efforts of others all around the world. And then the second is really a bit more tied to my policy and Noura's policy nerd on the inside, is that how do we ensure, while we're looking at this grassroots efforts, if there's an opportunity to sort of ensure cohesion between the policy level or the higher level action. And we're aiming to launch what we're calling the Planetary Action Network. In essence, it's really trying to be the champion of what we call planetary repair. And this is a concept that Professor Carlos Duarte and ourselves worked on defining, but at its core, it's trying to answer one simple question. Can we really find opportunities for socioeconomic mobility for individuals through the active action of repairing our planet? Or are we trying to look at all of these issues in silos? Climate in one instance, land in another, biodiversity in a third. I think this is sort of pulling us in all sorts of directions. So we need this type of cohesion and consistency and sort of a prioritization mechanism that allows us to look beyond multiple goals and targets that the SDGs are currently trying to put us on the track to. In some cases, we're not necessarily arguing that there are points of amelioration that one can look into. But let's say, while we're seeing backtracking in some, there is an opportunity for outside efforts to help support the system in a more effective way and in a more focused manner. So in a sense, this is our two dimes and what we're trying to contribute into this space. It's just to say that we welcome all of your outreach and in true Saudi spirit, Hayyakum Allah and welcome to Saudi Arabia. And we really look forward to getting to know every single one of you over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Princess Mashel. And we have heard a lot about the warm welcoming and the hospitality of the Saudis. So we look forward to experiencing it collectively together. I am extremely inspired by both of your remarks, and we are so grateful to be working with you in this space as we kickstart the Riyadh Action Agenda and the huge opportunities for collaboration and coordination going forward. We have 10 minutes for questions, and I know that there's a lot of exciting comments here. I wonder if I can pinpoint Maggie from Siwi, who put a good question, and I think it was directed towards Nigel Gonzalo, if you don't mind being spotlighted on that question. And of course, any other colleagues, please raise your hands and we will use the rest of our time effectively. Maggie.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, you're a little
great.
quiet,
Sorry.
but we can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in a cafe, so I'm trying not to be too loud in between meetings, in between COPs also. Yes, my question was to Gonzalo and Nigel, and perhaps to you guys around. We've been working closely together with the Climate Action Agenda. And of course, my question is that we have a unique opportunity now with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a 2-year work plan, a recognition of the importance of non-state actors, and as you mentioned, the actions and the experience, the expertise and the knowledge that we can bring to the discussions. So I was wondering, what is the thinking now of creating these pathways and bridges with the COP presidencies in order to influence the policies and decisions being made within the frameworks? Because the initiatives are great to showcase what we do to create collaboration and cooperation, but we really need, and we saw the importance of multilateralism at COP29 also. So we really need to be able to bring this up to the level of decision makers and what's being discussed within the UNCCD. So I was wondering how, in preparing for the Riyadh Action Agenda, what are the thoughts around bringing the content, the expertise, the stakeholders from the Riyadh Action Agenda closer to the discussions and the policy framing that's being done within the UNCCD convention, and working with the COP presidency around that for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Maggie. If I
Please.
can react very rapidly. So, as you know, in this moment, when it comes to the climate agenda, most of our efforts are willing to influence decision-making process when it comes to NDCs. And of course, in this case, it should be very much related to land neutrality targets. So the logic of both processes, and we're hoping, of course, to have also a stronger path towards the same thing when it comes to NBSAP. So in the biodiversity convention, bringing evidence to decision makers at the national level that they can and should incorporate these examples and this capacity of non-state actors when they are defining and then implementing their national plans. That's the end game, right? And we hope that what we will be measuring in all the 3 Rio conventions, plus, as I said, the plastic one, and following one after the other, that there is a capacity of implementation coming from non-state actors that is not only being congregated globally and highlighted globally, but then deployed nationally in a way that countries can then can incorporate and take into consideration that capacity when they're designing and delivering in their national plans. That would be my quick answer. Nigel, if you want to add something.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Maggie. Just a couple of thoughts. First is, of course, that we're very respectful of the fact that this is a party-driven process, and that what we're talking about is outside of the negotiating process. It's not a question of trying to push into the negotiating process, but as we discussed about the ambition and the pragmatism and the innovation, which I think Susan and Mashael demonstrated in abundance, can influence the vibe. So I think that's an important thing. It's to respect the party-driven nature, but recognize that we can influence in a very positive way. I think also, as you say, we have a real advantage in the sense of the 2-year cycle. You know, the 1-year cycle of the climate COPs can mean it's always manic. I think it's safe to say that the presidency and the secretariat are very supportive of the idea of an action agenda being mobilized. I think that's also a very strong collaboration. And it's also safe to say we haven't, I don't think, put a lot of thought into the answer to your question going forward. We've got some preliminary thoughts about the sort of rhythm of engagement and bringing the community together and touch points and sort of checking on progress from time to time. As Jenny said, we'll be having these daily stakeholder meetings by each theme. That'll be a time to get some input on that. I also think that you know, many of you will have relationships with delegations. I would say my experience is it's worth bringing to their attention that something's going on outside of, you know, it's very hard being in a delegation. You have to focus on very detailed technical negotiations, but it's also nice sometimes to know that there's a whole army of people all around the world supporting the process. And I think giving them a sense that this army of people, there's a few of us on the call, but there's thousands and hundreds of thousands in communities and in businesses and in cities and in NGOs all around the world, understand the urgency, are innovating solutions, have solutions that need to be scaled up, and that are absolutely in service of the multilateral goals. And I think that, you know, when you're a politician or a negotiator, you don't often get given much positive love. So I would encourage you, give some love to the delegations and the negotiations. Let them know they're not alone doing their very hard work, but we've all got their back, and we're all pouring our life force into bringing about systems change that the planet and its inhabitants, human and non-human, so desperately need. So I think any ideas about how we can improve that engagement, great. Of course, we don't have a UNCCD champion. Maybe in another COP or 2 COPs, that's an idea that will gain progress. So in the absence of that formal structure, it's up to us informally, but then, as I say, very much recognized and supported by the presidency and the secretariat. So yeah, all ideas very welcome. Let's keep imagining better ways of strengthening that link. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie, as well as Gonzalo and Nigel on that discussion. Extremely important to see how we work together on this. I'm conscious of time. Professor Mohammed, would you like to offer a very brief question? And then can I ask one of my Ambition Loop colleagues to copy the wonderful chat, because there's a lot of follow-up we need to do as well there. So do copy paste that. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring and aspiring discussions being part of this. Thanks, Nigel and the whole team. We are very excited for Monday. And I think the last COP before the new year, before your Christmas. So welcome to you all. I think one thing in terms of the engagement, I do from part of the university, I do strongly believe, and since we engage the youth community, we bring the youth community, okay, but really, we need to put them into the decision-making process, how it can be, because whatever we are discussing for the future, right? For them. So really, we need them to be involved in the process. The second agenda, and we'll be launching, and we discuss with them, we are launching the Global Youth BCD Biodiversity, Climate and Desertification Network, where we would like to create a platform for all the youth activities country-wise. The secondly, in terms of the data, as you know, we did a policy paper on the data issues when the different countries are submitting the voluntary report. A lot of transparency are needed, and we really need some kind of guidelines of the transparency and the validation of the data as well. And because to us, it would be difficult to compare good data with the bad data and to make a global agenda based on the mixture of the good and bad data of different countries. Very interestingly, sometimes some cutoff point, the data changes or behave in a different way. So I think this data and the youth engagement should be one of the priority. And I like to thank Nigel for bringing the high-level champion like UNFCCC. Maybe we can introduce something like that. But to me, you all are the champion, and all the people are here. They are the champion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohammed. That was wonderful. Indeed, we are all champions on this together. This is the kickoff. Next week, we will launch this agenda and we will build it together with all of you. Thank you for noting the importance of youth. Thank you for offering your support to us and guidance. This is going to be something that we'll continue to work on together. And thank you for joining us, dear colleagues, for today. We will end the webinar now, and we will invite you to join us next week in Riyadh at these different multi-stakeholder dialogues every day following specific thematic days. And again, if I could just ask our colleagues once more to pop in the feedback form, as well as our land@ambitionloop.earth email. If you haven't gotten, you've obviously find us today, but that way you have a central way to connect with us going forward. And on behalf of our team, very grateful for your willingness to jump into this call and work together. So see you next week in Riyadh, and we go forward.
Thank you. See you.